So, since we don't have Wisconsin Public Television here tonight, I don't have to do the formal introduction, but thank you for coming again. I'm Tom Zinnan. I work here at the Biotech Center. I also work for the the Division of Extension. And on behalf of those folks, thanks again for coming here to Wednesday Night at the Lab. We do this every Wednesday night, 50 times a year. Tonight, I'm delighted to welcome Bruce back for his fifth talk.
Sixth.
You said fifth.
I lied. Let's count. Me and Tina on high definition TV, 3 solar energies, and then the future of television, and then tonight.
What's really great is when the speaker embarrasses you for quoting the speaker.
It's all from love.
I know, it is love. Bruce, where were you born?
Ann Arbor, Michigan.
Where'd you go to high school?
Went to high school in Amherst, Milford, New Hampshire.
And where'd you go undergrad?
Boston University.
What'd you study?
Broadcasting and film.
And then you went to?
Work.
Florida.
I went to work.
Yeah.
I worked at the ABC affiliate in Orlando for 5 years. Came here, worked for Wisconsin Public Television for 30 years, just short of 30 years. And now I am the video dude for the Freedom from Religion Foundation.
Way to go. And you are here tonight, not with any of that affiliation, but because you are a citizen scientist.
Cry.
That is, of course, the national anthem of the United Kingdom, but you've remained seated. Okay. Tonight is going to be pretty cool because I've been thinking, why don't I buy an electric car? Yeah.
Why don't you buy an electric car?
Well, I can give you about 20,000 reasons. But I think he's going to address some of the cool things because you have been on a road trip. Is that correct?
I have been on a road trip.
So tonight, Bruce is going to talk specifically about can you live without a gasoline car? And I'm going to be in the back listening pretty hard to this. Please join me in welcoming Bruce Johnson back to Wednesday Night at the Lab.
Thank you for that. I was suffering over how I was going to give that car away, and you just wiped it off the map. It's perfect. Let's do some housekeeping first. Who here in this place brought a Tesla and is willing to give people rides? Oh my gosh. We got what, 6, 7? Who here wants a ride? Okay, here's what we're going to do. You know where lot 20 is, where the gates are for lot 20? There's that loading dock on the other side of the gates towards University Ave. Everybody who has a car and everybody who wants a ride, go down there after we get done talking today. And I guarantee you...
Where?
Okay, lot 20 is over there.
Right.
University Ave is over there. And the gates that go like this that you have to pay $2 to get out of. $2, Tom?
Yeah, sure.
Just on the other side, there's a loading dock. And you can get into your cars there. And let's please not go too...
opposite Randall.
Yeah, right across from the WID, actually. And so whatever you do, don't get any speeding tickets. I wipe my hands of this whole thing. So as Tom was saying, I worked for Wisconsin Public Television for 30 years, and I got to tell you two things up front. I know I mumble. I know I talk fast. If you miss it, believe me, this is not a surprise to me. If something gets past you, raise your hand and say, slow down. I will not be offended. Next, I recorded something north of 1,000 lectures for University Place in my last 7 years at public television. 350 of them were in this room. I've seen a lot of lectures. And I'm going to do something right now that I tell people never to do in a lecture. I'm giving away the punchline in the second slide, okay? Can you get away without a gas car? Can you live without a gas car? Well, duh. Of course you can get away without a gas car. Lots of people live without cars at all, buses, bicycles, walking, things like that. In the city, that kind of makes sense. But there's much, much more to the story. So let's go through the slides here. This is me. That's me. Not very recently, that's me, but that's me. We already told most of these stories. I have been a geek forever. Who here, when they were kids, went to Radio Shack and bought those P-Box kits that were little plastic things, and you soldered it all together, and it never worked because you always burned the transistor out because you didn't have a heat sink or something? That was me. It was a nice try. I think I had a strobe light that worked once. But I was always into it. I was into the electronics, always into music. I was a drummer and a sax player and guitar player and stuff like that. My wife and I decided that, we had to put a new roof on our house because our house was built in 72 and had never had a new roof put on. Never, ever, ever, till 2007. And you'd walk up there and it'd be like, just really sad and saggy. So we decided if we're going to put a roof on, we might as well put solar panels on. And we got hooked up with the guys at Full Spectrum Solar, and they were very cool about it, and they're very cool to this day. So here's some pictures. Here's what we did in 2007. This first set of solar panels over here was my first set, plus the thing that's pointed like that. Those are hot water panels. And believe me, in the summertime, when your hot water tank says 180 degrees, you can take a really good shower. Now, it doesn't come out at 180 degrees. There's a tempering valve, makes it down to 120, so you don't burn yourself, but it lasts forever. And then in 2000, excuse me? Oh.
I said yes.
Yes. And then in 2012, the Nissan Leaf finally came out. We actually ordered it in advance. Then there was a little thing called a tsunami, which pushed it back by a year, but that's cool. I can dig that. We bought that with a 24 kilowatt hour battery pack. We thought it was huge at the time. Little did we know. We drove the Leaf for 50,000 miles. Here's the sum total of maintenance on the Leaf in 50,000 miles. There was a front end noise that the car made when it was below 38 degrees, specifically 38 degrees. Nissan couldn't fix it. Beyond that, set of tires at about 40,000, 35,000, cabin air filter. Did it once, probably should have done it twice. That's all the maintenance this car took in 50,000 miles. In 2012, when we bought the Leaf, we decided to put more solar panels on the roof, the other set right there, to make sure that we would generate enough electricity to cover the entire use of the Leaf. And at that point, we went up to 4.15 kilowatts of power on the roof. And if we had not factored in the Leaf, we would have made 85% of all of our household electricity at that point. With the Leaf plugged in, it was more like 45%. But it was definitely covering the juice in the Leaf by miles. I mean, by 100%, easily.
What was the range on it?
The range on the Leaf at its best, 70, maybe, yeah, but when it was cold, holy cow. The other thing about the previous one, the other thing about the earlier Leafs was that they had a very inefficient heating system. It was like running a hairdryer, and it just sucked the battery dead. So we didn't do that. It had a heated steering wheel, something my Tesla, oddly enough, does not have. And so the heated steering wheel and the heated seats, you'd run that and you would shiver, honestly. But you know what? I was driving an electric car. Who cares? So in say what? Oh, I thought Tom had a comment. 2016, Nissan was on the cusp of turning out their brand new Generation 2 Leaf. So by doing so, they decided to put a buy down on their 2016 Leafs. That was by the way, my first Leaf cost $38,000. For a medium-sized economy car, that's a lot of money, I admit it. That is the first adopter tax. This car, which is a much better car, has a larger pack, 30 kilowatt hours, better heating by far. Some other things, the trunk is much larger. This car cost $32,000 list. They took $10,000 off, minus the $7,500 federal tax rebate, tax credit, and the $4,000 that the Nissan dealers kindly gave me for a $2,000 car. I think I paid $14,000 for that car new. And we're driving it to this day, and it's a wonderful car, and it has never had one hiccup.
The range on that one?
Range on this is close to 100 on a good day, if you're not on the highway. And then 2018, my wife said, let's just get an X. Well, we were lucky. I'd been saving money for a long, long time. I'm a MG&E stockholder. Thanks, Dave. I'd saved a lot of money. My wife has saved money. We figured, what the heck, just go for it. So my wife ordered this car in, I think it was March of 2018. It was delivered in June. And it's got, you normally tell the insurance company you drive 12,000 miles a year, which was basically about right. I just looked at the clock today. In less than a year, it's got 18,000 miles on it. It's just that much fun to drive. So there's the details. Now, I got to tell you, I'm not here to sell you a Tesla. I'm really not. Because there's not a lot, but there's competition out there. For example, that is the Audi e-tron, just came out. That is the Chevy Bolt, a fine little car. That is the International Car of the Year 2019, the Jaguar I-Pace. I defy anybody to drive their Jaguar, electric or not, through a mud puddle like that. But the electrical part just makes it all the more fun. And then, of course, there is the new Nissan Leaf, which this is the jazziest one I've ever seen in my life, which just got a new battery added to it, which gives it a range of about 220 miles, or a claimed range of 220. These are all good long-range alternatives to the Teslas. So having said that, this is not the first time I've ever done this. In June 2016, my wife and my children were in the Wisconsin Children's Choir, and they were singing and doing a tour out to the East Coast, and they went all the way out to Boston. And I figured, what the heck, let's follow them. So we rented a Tesla from a guy in Milwaukee from Turo.com. Anybody ever use Turo? Get the car of your dreams. It's on there someplace. And you can rent it for either ridiculous or semi-ridiculous prices. We rented this for a week, had a blast, got all the way out to Boston and back, no problem. And this is 2 years ago when there were about half as many superchargers. And if you wanted to rent a Tesla today, I just looked at this today, the very first thing when you put in cars from Milwaukee is a Tesla Model 3, which oddly enough, is offered by the same guy who rented me the Model S. And he will deliver it to you here in Madison if you want him to. Once again, it's $144 a day, but if you get it for a week, you get a discount. That's still real money, though, I will admit that. My travel partners. On the left is my wife, Cynthia Stroy. We've been married just a little under 25 years. We met when I came to Wisconsin Public TV. On the right is Mike Eicher, who is my friend of 32 years, who is a photographer at Wisconsin Public TV to this day. We've been hanging around, going skiing, having adventures. We're bike riding buddies. So it was time to have an adventure. I like going skiing in the winter. I was skiing with Mike a couple of years ago, and I realized, holy crap, I've been skiing for 52 years. Which is hard to believe. Where did they all go? So I have friends in Vermont. Tom Barnes on the left there and his wife Sue. Tom and I met when I worked at WFTV in Orlando in 1982. And we're scuba buddies and ski buddies, and we were adventure buddies. And I ran away to Wisconsin. He stayed in Florida for another couple of years, but he's been in Vermont, and Stowe specifically, for about 10 or 11 years now. They owned a B&B for about 9 years. And then finally they sold it. Now Stu is lawyering, and Tom, believe it or not, is one of the managers of a regional bus system in rural northern Vermont. Who would have guessed there was a intercity bus system in rural Vermont? So he runs that now, and I figured, what the heck, let's go take a ride in our car to go skiing at Stowe and see if we can make it. Because here's the trip. Not a small trip. Now, you gotta... I was really surprised that both Google and the Tesla trip planning software decided going through Canada was the way to go. It didn't make sense to me until we got into the middle of it. But it's a pretty good long ride. That's about 2,500 miles right there. Now here are where you charge. This is where you charge. This is the most recent supercharger map. The high-speed chargers for Teslas, and only Teslas. You can't charge other cars there. But stand by, there will be a slide to fix that in a little while. All the red ones are active. All the gray ones are inactive. Notice the big gray swath across North Dakota. The only state in America that does not have at least one supercharger. Now, who's in a hurry to go to North Dakota? All right, we got one in the back. You have to go to campgrounds and use your campground plug.
Absolutely, I put it into the Tesla guide, right?
Yeah.
And you know how it's buffering.
Oh yeah.
And then it says, we're working on it.
We're working on it. Yeah, I'm waiting for Fargo. I mean, Fargo would be nice. Come on. So anyway, that's all the superchargers in the United States. Here is specifically the Northeast and the Midwest where we're going to be. Now you see, there's no lack of these things. And they're spaced specifically so that you can get to from one to the other, or maybe skip one and be within 200 or some miles. Because when you're traveling at 72 degrees, or at least normal spring, summer, fall temperatures, that's not a hard jump for even the smallest battery Tesla. Now this car, the Tesla I have, has currently the biggest battery, which is kind of nice, because you get a lot more flexibility. On the other hand, as you will see, cold is the wild card. Now, by the way, this adventure is unofficially sponsored by these following 3 sponsors. You'll find out why in about 1 minute. So let's go on a trip. January 31st, 2019. Who remembers that day? Whoever got out of bed, who bothered to get out of bed that day?
Polar.
It was the Polar Vortex 2, or was it 1 or 2 this time? It was hellish. It was the worst. I mean, I don't mind cold weather, but I mean, I'm getting old enough to think that snowbirding is starting to make sense. But I can't go there yet. So it was 24 below zero at 6:30 in the morning when we started this thing. Now here's something as a guy who's been shooting documentaries for 35 years, I'm really embarrassed that my coverage of this trip really collapsed after the first couple of days because I just couldn't get my head into it. But here's the trick that this is the only picture I have of it, unfortunately. I built this ski box right here out of about 2x2 and coroplast. And everything inside there is 3 sets of skis, 3 sets of poles, and then we put our suitcases on top. Now this is the back seat. The X has a 60-40 back seat, so you can fold down half of it. Now this goes all the way to the tailgate, all the way to the hatch. This folds down, and what I built was a mattress out of a sleeping bag, some memory foam, and a bunch of several quilts. And I got to tell you, who here has ever had the chance to sleep in a sleeper car on a train? Just as cool. Because you know what? You're asleep, but you're not getting the whackety, 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 whackety. It's just smooth. Anyway, we didn't use it a lot, but when we did use it, it was great. Plus, you can camp out in the back of the X. You can camp out in any of the Teslas because they're big enough when you fold the seats down to lay in them. And the nice thing about electric car is you can run the air conditioning all night and not asphyxiate. Day 1, leg 1, 125 miles to Meyer, just on the outskirts of Chicago. I have a video here. Let's see if it's audible. First leg of the trip here. You can see it's 24 degrees below zero, which, as we can all assume, cold is not good for batteries. So our first stop on this trip is going to be in Rolling Meadows, Illinois, right next to a Meyer, which is a very nice store, by the way. We don't have any of those in Wisconsin. And if you look at the graph down here, you'll see what the car is telling me that by the time we get to there, we have 20% of the battery left. That's okay. We're cool. We do 70 miles an hour, 75. And if you look outside of the book, we run into these really interesting ice fog, which is kind of terrifying. Cold and batteries do not mix. And here we are traveling during the Polar Vortex 2. It's going to be exciting. Should be exciting. Story of my life. So, there is a great piece of software for your Tesla and your computer to talk to each other. It's called Teslafy. And if you program it correctly, and it's not hard to program correctly, it'll tell you just about every operating parameter of your car. And it puts them out in nice little charts like this. Now, I will tell you that this is kind of another thing I learned in all of my lectures that I did in this room was don't put too much data on one screen. This is far too much data on one screen.
Violation, Bruce.
I know. Throw the flag. 15 yards. But there are things to watch out for. For example, this is a charge right here. This shows me that I'm charging. I charged the car at home from 3 to 6 in the morning, started at 83% and went to 79% of the battery. I had gone to the Hy-Vee to charge to 83% the night before, and I just couldn't stand the cold after a while. Even though you can run the heater while you are charging, which is nice. So anyway, I brought it home, plugged it into my level 2 charger, my 220 40 amp charger, and it got up to 97%. Close enough. We take off and away we go, and you'll see immediately that we're getting 58% efficiency, 546 watt hours per mile. Now, you should be getting at least 3 miles per kilowatt hour, 333 in a Model X. This is insanely inefficient, but it's all because it's cold. Look, the temperature outside is 18 below. The temperature inside, by the way, is 61.6. You might have noticed I was wearing gloves and a hat and a coat. Now, you'll notice a trend over time that as we get more comfortable with this thing, we turn the heat up more because we know we can, but I would hate to blow it in the very first leg, you know? So my wife's in the back wrapped up in quilts and then, got all my stuff on. So here's the worst thing that happened on the entire trip happened right here when we are getting down to Elk Grove, getting down to Rolling Meadows. And for some unknown reason, I haven't figured it out since, we're driving down on the interstate and all of a sudden the entire roof covers with ice on the inside. I mean, it didn't take 10 seconds for it to go whoosh, totally white out. So we're scraping the thing with our hands, and the exit's coming up, and the funny thing is the autopilot knew where it was all the time. I could have let it drive itself off the road. But I was a little panicky by that point, so I did it by hand. The other thing I want to point out is that saying this is leg one is a little confusing because you see 1, 2, 3, 4 different parts here. Every time you put the car into park, Teslafy considers that a leg. So when you see multiple pieces of data for one leg, that's what the deal is. We stopped in the middle. For example, right here, we stopped at the South Bullet McDonald's to go to the bathroom. People will do that. People are not as capable as machines in that regard.
Ruth?
So anyway, yes, ma'am, sir.
My guess is there are a bunch of people in the room that would love to go down rabbit hole, so I'm not going to give a rabbit hole, but I'm just going to pose a question, because I think electric vehicles sometimes get a bum rap with cold weather.
Okay.
So my question is just a neutral question. Do internal combustion engines perform differently in cold weather?
Thank you, Dave. Dave Benferrato from MG&E, everybody. Here's the deal. The most efficient gasoline engine is about 25% efficient in getting your gasoline into motion. The other 75% or more is heat and noise. That's why the heater in your gas car can throw flames at you at any time you want it to, because there's so much waste energy. Electric cars, on the other hand, are like 85% efficient. So there's not a lot of heat left over. The heat you generate in the car comes out of the battery, comes out of the energy you have in the battery you would want to use for motion. Now, there are a couple of tricks with the Tesla you can use to make it go farther when it's cold. Like one is called range mode. The first thing range mode does is knocks down your heater by about 50%. And I've been in that all winter. I mean, I'm just kind of crazy like that. Having said that, one of the things that's cool about Teslas is that they have what's called Easter eggs. And there are all sorts of crazy things. And I'm not making this up when I say one of them is a fart generator, where you push, like if you engage this, every time you hit the turn signal, it'll fart and make the kids in the car laugh. Something else they have is what they call the Yule log, and it turns up on the middle screen, which is about yo big. It shows you a picture of a burning log, and I mean you could tell flames are coming out of the heater. It can make a lot of heat, but a lot of heat costs you a lot of energy, and that's energy you can't use to go someplace. So that's why we went really, really cold to start with. But like I said, it warms up over time. So here we are at the Meyer. We got there with 19% left on the battery. The car is very good at predicting its own use, by the way. It's kind of smart that way. So we plugged in. We went inside the Meyer, had a donut or something. Hung in there for an hour 23, which was a little bit long because we were trying to get all the way to the top. If you use the Tesla trip planning programs, and there are several of them, they try to make you get someplace as fast as possible by telling you, well, you only have to charge to about 64% to make it to the next leg. I'm sorry, I'm not that cool with this yet. I want a safety buffer as big as I can get it. So we let it sit there and charge. Took an hour 23, but we got the car almost full. And the next leg was 119 miles to the next supercharger. We actually skipped probably about 15 superchargers to get to the one in St. Joseph, Michigan, where there was a Panera Bread. Go figure.
What was the cost of the charge?
Oh, I was going to do that last, but I'll tell you now. Here's a problem that Tesla has. The rules change all the time. All the time. When I bought this car, because I had a friend of mine give me a reference, somebody else who was a previous Tesla owner, I got free supercharging for the life of the car. Great deal. On the other hand, if you don't have free supercharging, and I think I'm right on this one, I think it's 28 cents per kilowatt hour right now.
It varies based on state. Sometimes it's time-based and sometimes it's energy-based, but it roughly still is about half as much as gas.
Yeah, it always pencils out to be far less than gas, but 28 cents per kilowatt hour. So basically speaking, if I went from 0 to 100 in my 100 kilowatt hour pack, that would cost me $28, but that would take me 290 miles on a warm day without heat. So we made it to Michigan, St. Joseph, Michigan. Now you'll see we have two chargers here. Sometimes you got to pay attention to these things because you'll plug it in and it won't start. Not a good thing when you're going into Panera to have your green goddess Cobb salad, which was about time for lunch by that time. So anyway, you have to pay attention. I have a phone app. I have an app on my phone that doesn't everybody have an app on their phone that talks to their car? Here, I'll show you. Here we go. I can look inside my car, I can turn the heat on, I can make the horn honk, I can open the doors. It's kind of stupid in that way, but it's silly in that way. But it's good to be able to watch the thing whether it's charging when you think it's charging and it's not. So anyway, we started the charge there. You see the battery heater icon is on, so it was still way, way, way below zero, I think. Oh, I'm sorry, it was 2 degrees above zero. Our next leg was to Ann Arbor, Michigan, my birthplace. I've never actually been a tourist there. So we drove 150 miles, got there with 27% of the battery left, and we charged to 87% in 44 minutes. See, when this works, it works okay. That took an hour 20, because once again, it was still pretty cold. Our next leg was to Comber, Ontario, which is a industrial little town with nothing in it, except for one thing. There's the car out there on the supercharger. Can anybody guess where we are? Come on, this is not hard, people. We're in Canada. Tim Hortons, yay! They've got the wackiest donuts in Canada. I couldn't eat one, but they sure looked pretty cool. Then our last leg of the day was to, I can't remember the name now, Ingersoll, Ontario, to a place called the Elmhurst Inn. That leg was 108 miles. When we got there, we had 54% of the battery left, which was okay. So we were going to see another video here. Believe me, when you see this, you'll see why I was the photographer and not the host.
So between myself and Cynthia, we're not as young as we used to be. We're over 150 years old together, so we don't travel as long and as far as we used to. So last time we
Electric golf.
This is just short of Toronto in Canada. A super lovely place. But one of the reasons why we stopped here is because when we were driving through Michigan, I looked up on my various computers, for hotels that had Tesla destination chargers. That's not the same thing as a supercharger. Here, I'll show you what it is. They have the same plug, basically.
They have the same plug
here, but it's this thing right here. This is a very low-powered charger compared to a supercharger. Where a supercharger has 440 volts DC at 120 amps, this one has 220 volts AC and about 6 amps, I think. Or no, excuse me, 30 amps. So
actually
he came
40.
up here and he had about a third of a charge finished when we stopped driving. We plugged it in last night at 9 o'clock. It's 7:30 right now, and it just finished charging. Now that's perfect for us because we came to a destination and we charged. If we're going long distances really fast, that's not so cool, but these things are popping up everywhere, and I'll show you a map of them in a little while. Let's unplug. How civilized.
So I was wrong. It was actually 40 amps. It was just pure serendipity that we were lucky enough that it filled the car up in the time that we went to bed and got up and had breakfast. Now, having said that, I said the magic word serendipity. And in all of my other lectures that I've talked about electric cars, one of the things that electric cars do is it takes the serendipity out of driving. You can't just hop in your car and buzz off someplace without thinking about how much juice is in the car now, how much will be there when I get to the other end, am I going to have enough to get back or do another charger or stuff like that. Now, to be fair, the Tesla does a lot of that stuff for you because it shows you all of the superchargers and other chargers on the map in the car. And honestly, it'll steer you directly to them. In fact, it wants to. It almost begs you to use it. Here's the map of only destination chargers. Now, there are a bunch of these in Madison. There's one at the Hilton. There's one, I think, at the Edgewater. Places you would expect them. And also, they're popping up in all of the new hoity-toity apartment buildings downtown. If you can afford to live in one of those apartment buildings, you can probably afford a Tesla, and they can probably afford to let you have electricity for it. Because all the kids who work at Epic live in those things. This is, of course, the Elmhurst Inn and Spa here in Ingersoll. Very useful if you're going to be stopping someplace for a span of time, so like an overnight charge. Now, if we had gotten there and the plug had been in use by somebody else, it would have been sad. But they had 4 plugs. We were going to make it just either way. And as I said, I pointed out, I walked right past a Volkswagen e-Golf, something you don't see in the United States. So we're not the only ones pulling this stunt off. So Elmhurst Inn was a very nice place. Great breakfast, too. So here's our next leg. Now you look at this thing and it says I drove 259 miles in this temperature. That seems unlikely. It says I went from Ingersoll to Kingston all in one swipe. I did not go from Ingersoll to Kingston all in one swipe. There was a stop in the middle. If you notice here though, the machine says the data accuracy was 58.30. And I've never seen it that low, but the reason it's that low is because when we stopped for a charge in Port Hope, Ontario, where there was a Tim Hortons, there was almost no cell phone service. The car is a cell phone as well. It has a built-in AT&T cell phone. And it's calling home, it's pinging home all the time. I was in a discussion on Facebook recently to a guy who said, well, I don't want a car who knows where I am all the time. It's like, why? I mean, that's part of the game. I mean, personally, I think it's great that they can keep an eye on the car and maintain it from a distance. In the time I've had this, in less than a year, I've had 6 over-the-air software updates, and everyone gets cooler. Everyone gets cooler. So anyway, I don't have any data for the trip to Port Hope, Ontario, because that was a failure of the cell phone system. I don't know why Google would even offer you this kind of a cutoff, but sometimes Google is Google, and I have another example of that coming up real soon. So we went from Tim Hortons to Panera, of course, because there's always a Tim Hortons or a Panera where you're going to charge. We ended up at the Panera at noon, actually. That's right. It was noon there when we got there. We had a lovely lunch, charged up. It took us 50 minutes to charge at that point. We ended up with 94% of a charge. And then we were going to it was very, I got 2 different recommendations from the various trip planning software. Half of it, one said go to Plattsburgh, New York, to the mall where there is a supercharger. Half of it said, the other one said, go to Montreal and then go south. And I thought, why? It seems like that's longer. So some software is smarter than other software. We get to Plattsburgh, we charge the thing up. Everything's cool. Google wanted us to go like this across Lake Champlain, like you would do in the summertime. Ferries do not run in the winter. So we charged it up, and we ended up having to go all the way to Canada anyway to get the only bridge across Lake Champlain, all the way up there. And you see right up here it says Alburg, New York, I think it is, or Vermont. Stopped by a train going across a train trestle on a 2-lane road for 25 minutes. In the middle of winter, when you're scratching your head saying, I wonder if I have enough battery to get to where I'm going. But it worked out okay. My friends live in Hyde Park, Vermont. We got there in about 2 hours, a little bit longer than that. They had lovely taco dinner waiting for us. We were only 4 hours later than we thought we were going to be. Once again, if you're in a hurry, this might not be the thing for you. But there are other upsides.
Do you have a recharger you can carry along with you to plug it into your friend's house?
Excellent question. If I had another car, I'd give it to you. Yes, every Tesla, every electric car comes with a cable. The capabilities of the cable vary. For example, my first Leaf cable was a 120 volt cable that you could actually send to a guy and he would refit it to be a 220 volt cable, which would be more than twice as fast. The Tesla cable comes with 2 ends on it. One is for 120 volts. One is what I call a campground plug. It's called a NEMA 1450 that you plug into like a dryer plug, and it's much, much faster. Now, when I got to Tom's house, that's a good question. I plugged into the 120 volt outlet on his front porch because he didn't have a dryer that was close to his driveway, and I did start charging it there. Now you look at the charge right here on the top. This thing charged for 7 hours and 54 minutes. I started at 44, ended at 52. I got 6%. But the reason is because it was not just putting juice into the battery. It also was heating the battery to keep it from getting cold and inefficient. Now, okay, fair trade. I can deal with that. But there are other options, and I'll show you another option here in a second. The first place we went skiing was the Stowe Mountain Resort. Anybody been to Stowe? Highly recommended. It's very fun skiing. But if you notice, we didn't go to Stowe. We went down to 1813 Mountain Road on the Mountain Road, the Mountain Road, where there was a charge point charger. Did anybody here plug into the charge point charger down in the basement? Well, not all of you at the same time. There's only 2 plugs. Yes, ChargePoint is a national company. It's actually an international company that provides charging for electric cars. Now this ChargePoint here is what's called a level 2 charger. It's roughly equivalent to the one I have in my garage. 220 volts, 40 amps usually, maybe 50, depending on where you're at. So Tom, as I said, Tom Barnes runs the bus system runs part of the bus system for Northern Vermont. Oddly enough, one of his bus runs goes up Mountain Road to Stowe. And it goes right past where this charger is. So I figured, hey, what a great deal. Have Tom, make sure I get a bus. We parked the car here. We parked it for, what's it say here? 7 hours and 13 minutes while we were skiing. You notice this thing only got up to 30 amps, so it's not one of the most powerful ones. They charged me $7.52 for the electricity, which is still a pretty good deal. And we went from 41 to 86%, which, because when you're just zipping back and forth in the car in town, as opposed to going out on the highway and driving like a bat out of something, your needs are far lower. So anyway, we went skiing. By the way, just an aside about charging. Yeah?
So if you went to 80%, again, I'm thinking in miles. So how many miles could you go if you got charged up to 80% in your particular car?
That's a how long is a piece of string question?
When it's really cold.
When it's really cold, I mean, 80% I think pencils out to like 242. They will say it's 242, but it's probably 210.
Again, I'm just trying to think, is it like 80 or is it like 100?
And when we were, it's probably important to point out the fact that most electric cars don't want you to charge the battery to 100%. Because it's not good for it over and over. And it's especially not good for it if you charge it to 100% and leave it there. They always want you to charge to 80% or 90% and then discharge, if you can help it, down to about 20%. Now, it's not fatal if you go over those things, but you don't want to leave it at 100 and you don't want to leave it below 20. And it's not hard to stay inside those parameters. So anyway, ChargePoint as a company has all of these chargers. Once again, there are 2 of them in lot 20. There are 2 of them in lot 7 over there. There's a couple over by Camp Randall. The hospital has a couple of them. Steenberg Library has a couple of them on campus. By the way, on campus they're all free, so if you can plug in, you get your juice for free. MG&E has 30 L2s and 33 L2s? 34 level 2s and 4 level 3s, high-speed chargers. But only 2 are working, he says, Dave. You guys got to get together.
No, he told me.
Oh, okay. Okay, only 2 are working, but a level 3 charger is a CHAdeMO charger, which has a plug that's like this big around. It's roughly the equivalent of a supercharger for a Tesla, but it works in Leafs, and it works in BMWs, and it works in Mitsubishis, and it works in all the other cars. One plug or the other, the CHAdeMO or the CCS plug will charge all the other cars except Teslas. So anyway,
Adapter for CCS.
Say what? Oh, it's coming. It hasn't been released yet.
Wait, CHAdeMO.
The CHAdeMO Tesla adapter is out. It does not work in the Model 3, and it costs $604. Not going there quite yet. So you look at these numbers. There are a huge number of ChargePoint chargers all around the country here, and also in Europe. Now, this is not the only company that does this. There's also EVgo, which has 3 chargers in Wisconsin, in Madison, and a bunch in Milwaukee, actually. They charge you to plug into these things for the most part. It's not free. But by the same token, it almost always pencils out to be far less than gasoline. Now, here's the national ChargePoint map. Here's the ChargePoint map for Stowe. That's an awful lot of chargers in a town like Stowe. It's a little town. But by the same token, it's a tourist town, and they know they have to cater to the tourists. And here's the specific plug-in for Stowe Electric Sun and Ski Inn. Oh, no, I take it back. Stowe Kitchen, which is where we plugged in. It was a lovely little kitchen store. If you want to go buy yourself a hand towel, highly recommend you go to Stowe Kitchen. Nobody else was plugged in there, plugged it in. As you can see, I got 6.6 kilowatts for all the time I needed to be there. It cost me $7.50. Worked well. I was very happy with it. On the other hand, the Tesla Model X is a fun car. It's got a lot of cool stuff. I hate the back doors that go like this. We took the thing home after we charged here to Tom and Sue's house, decided to go out to dinner. We all piled everybody in the car. It was kind of sleety then. We get all the way to the restaurant, get into the parking lot, the back doors will not open. It goes beep, 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 beep. It's like, I literally, because I didn't know the trick, I literally had to take the speaker off the side door on the inside here and pull the little wire, which is the emergency pop open for the door. Bizarre. Just bizarre. I mean, I know why they put them on there. My wife and I, our first trip with this car, we went to Grand Marais, Minnesota and parked and camped in the car in the campground. And every time you popped the doors open, people came like flies. It was just like, is that a Tesla in Grand Marais?
Probably every Tesla owner has had an experience where they realized this car was designed in 70-degree California.
Yeah.
Well, they will push back on that and show you all sorts of video of them buzzing it around in Alaska. But it's impractical. And also on the Model 3, the Model 3 is not a hatchback; it's got a trunk. But you open the trunk, and the glass is here, the trunk is here. The trunk goes like this, and all the snow just slides into your trunk. Yeah, not the best design, but real pretty, really, really pretty. So anyway, the doors froze shut. We're not going to talk about that anymore. Oh, Elan. So we didn't drive it all on the day 4. We rode around in Tom's Subaru. He wanted to drive that around because it was like a snowmobile. 16 hours of charging, started at 64, ended at 81, 70% efficiency. But you got to keep the battery warm because if the battery gets cold soaked, it will refuse to charge. My mother-in-law has a Model 3, and she went to Florida in January. Smart woman. Went to Florida in January. I left it in my driveway. And the day before she was going to come back, I took it to the supercharger at Hy-Vee, plugged it in, and the thing just was like, it wasn't having any of it. I left it plugged in for 10 minutes, didn't do a thing. It didn't tell me what was wrong, which was the worst part. So finally I figured it out. I took it home, plugged it into my level 2 in my garage, and it charged just fine because the battery was too cold to accept a high-speed charge. And now since then, they've tossed out software that when this is a problem, a snowflake appears on the screen. Would have liked to have had that back then. Day 5, we went to a place called Sugarbush, a ski area called Sugarbush. Anybody here ski Sugarbush? Great place, really wonderful. I grew up I went to high school in New Hampshire. I had no idea that real mountains existed in Vermont. I went skiing at these 500, 600 foot tiny little hills, and I thought I was having a great time. These places are spectacular. But the really cool thing about Sugarbush is, look what I found at Sugarbush. I found a Tesla destination charger. They had 9 Tesla destination chargers and 4 level 2s for everybody else. And it was on their website somewhere that they had this. And we were going to go there anyway, but this made it all the better. So I got plugged in, and this was actually a very high-powered one as they go. You can see it was 72 amps at 216 volts. Got from 60 to 98 in 3 hours. Everybody should have one of these in their backyard. And by the way, just to prove the fact, we actually did go skiing. That's Mike and Cynthia and Tom. I've been a photographer my entire life. I'm not in any pictures. So the next day was the day we were starting to come home. So we went east, of course, because everybody to Wisconsin, you go east first. My wife and I are state capital geeks. We have 40 or 41 state capitals already, but we had already gotten all the rest of New England, but we had never gotten Maine, and we both said, if we don't do this now, we're probably never going to find a way to come back. So what the heck? So we charged the car up we left the car plugged in for 13 hours at Tom's house the night before we left, unplugged it, had 94%, and went all the way from Hyde Park, Vermont, to the Maine State House, which is only a couple miles from Panera, on one charge. And it was not hard. It was 183 miles. We didn't feel like we were in any danger at all. Now, having said that, everything except this little chunk of interstate right here was on 2-lane roads. We weren't rushing anywhere, that's for sure. But it was a beautiful ride, very scenic. I recommend New Hampshire in all sorts of ways. It's a great state. Then, of course, we went and saw the state capitol. Did I not put a picture of them? Oh, here we are. Here's the Maine state capitol. As state capitals go, I know this is not a lecture about state capitals, but I'll take that side turn here. Very workmanlike, very pretty. It has something that most state capitals don't have. Dedicated media parking. That should be required, I'm telling you. So anyway, we went and saw the state capitol. And then this is the steps we got, the 4 legs in the leg from Vermont to Maine. And nothing went wrong. And by the way, when we were sitting here, it was like 50 degrees by this point. It felt like it was 100 degrees. It was wonderful. So we had to turn around and go from Augusta, Maine, all the way to Auburn, Mass., which was our next charging stop, 200 miles. Piece of cake. Here's the map. Unfortunately, in Auburn, Maine, there was not either a Panera or a Tim Hortons or a Meijer. We went to the mall there. If you want to see what the future of the world is, the future of the United States is, tour malls. It's a little spooky out there. So we charged there, got up to 96%. We were going to Utica, New York to visit my niece. I actually grew up in Utica, New York when I was a young child. My niece still lives there. She was going to put us up for the night. So we had to take a quick jump to Lee, Massachusetts to get a little more slurp. We only went 82 miles in that thing to make sure we had enough electricity to get all the way to Utica. We charged there for 1 hour. No, that was the Auburn charge. Oh, that's right. We charged for 18 minutes, actually, in Lee, Massachusetts, just to make sure we had enough. There was a grocery store there we walked into, and it was just closing, too. So we drove all the way to Utica, to actually Marcy, New York, where she lives. 138 miles, no problems. Got in with 58% battery left. By the way, Tess Johnson, if you ever need real estate in upstate New York, call my niece. She rocks. Next day, day 7, we decided we were going to drive all the way back to Wisconsin from Utica. Quite doable. It's not so bad, especially when you have a bed in the back of the car. It's a stretch, but we had 3 drivers. I figured that what really makes this happen right is that we have 3 drivers. You can just rotate around, 2 people in the front and 1 person in the back. It's not too bad. So we had previously been to the Buffalo supercharger on our previous trip, 188 miles, a piece of cake. From there, we went from Buffalo to Erie, 104 miles, because we knew we had to fill up for a longer leg after that. There was a steak and shake at the Erie supercharger. Didn't deserve its own logo though. Now we had a 210-mile run all the way from Erie to Maumee, Ohio, which is south of Toledo. That was a long haul, piece of cake. Got there with, I have to go to the next page to find that. 210 miles. There was a lot of traffic in Cleveland. That wasn't fun. Yeah, we got to Maumee with 14 left, and we charged to 90 in less than an hour. We went for another 138 miles to Mishawaka, which is just outside of South Bend. We charged there for 26 minutes to get from 29 to 75. Drove from there all the way to the Mire again in Rolling Meadows. I was asleep at this point, and believe me, it was a wonderful ride. Rolling Meadows back to Madison, 131 miles. Piece of cake. It really, really works. This is the entire loop and our sponsors. As you see, we charged 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17 times in a week. And never once did I feel like we were going to run out of juice. Yes, sir?
How much of this trip did you let the car drive itself?
When I was driving, almost all of it. My wife is not comfortable with autopilot, and neither is Mike. Mike was very nervous with it. But I let the car drive itself as much as possible. And when I say drive itself, it's not what you think it is yet. It's getting there, but it's not there yet. Here are the statistics. Unfortunately, you have to shave off like 100 miles from this thing because my wife, about noon the day after, we got home at 3 in the morning. My wife hopped in the car at noon and went and got our dog from Beaver Dam and back. But time driven, 52 hours. Oops. 52 hours of driving. Used a megawatt of juice. Watt hours per mile, 382. That's actually pretty good for this temperature when you figure that when we started out, we were close to 500. That means I'm getting slightly less than 3 miles per kilowatt hour, which when you figure the car has a 100 kilowatt hour battery and 290 is its rated maximum range, that's actually pretty close. And it was cold 90% of the time. This also has the charges for these are all the charge point charges and the 120 volt charges at Tom's house. Charged for 68 hours. Now let me ask you guys a question. What do cars do 95% of the time? Nothing. Yes, that's all available charging time. So it's not that big of a deal. 18 supercharges, added 2,744 miles. Good thing because we traveled that distance. And it would have cost me $115 in electricity if I had paid for the electricity. The only constant is change. This came out yesterday. Tesla has announced that they have made a change in the Model S and the Model X, the 2 larger cars in their fleet. They're changing the front motor out from the relatively efficient one that's in there now to a ridiculously efficient one that they're putting in and adding 35 miles of range without changing the battery at all. just one piece of hardware, which is not retrofittable, unfortunately, is going to increase the range of this car. This is why I love this company. They just don't sit on their laurels. They are always fixing things. Here's another thing that I never thought I'd see. Who saw this? Does that say Republicans? Well, there's a backstory. There's always a backstory. The Assembly GOP plan from Adam Nylon from Pewaukee. Have we ever talked to this guy? We should. Maybe he's interested. The plan is funded through the state's share of a national settlement with car maker Volkswagen. That's called sequestered funds. They can't spend it on anything else. So before you start throwing roses at their feet, remember, they couldn't go out and spend this on, I don't know, pick a topic. Roads, for example, or cutting teachers' salaries. Ooh, did I say that or think that? Okay, and here is the last slide. I am a procrastinator. I was working on this thing this morning. I mean, I run up to deadlines on a regular basis. I saw this picture in my Facebook feed this morning. My old boss, Diane Kostecki, and her partner, Nancy Chesky, are driving south to go on vacation, and they're going through St. Louis. And Diane takes a picture of Nancy in front of the Gateway Arch. Funny? Yeah. What's that? That is a Tesla Model 3. They're getting everywhere. They're just popping up everywhere, and the dam has burst. The snowball is rolling down the hill. Critical mass has been attained. Let's keep going. That's that. I'm under an hour. Yay! Questions? Shoot.
So in Wisconsin, most of our electricity comes from coal.
Not at my house, it doesn't.
Right, but in the state. So what's the
Here's the deal.
advantage to the environment?
Here's the deal. In even the most coal-intense states, even in West Virginia and Montana, Wyoming? Montana. The least efficient electric car on coal is still more efficient than a Prius. And the Prius is probably as good as it gets in terms of gasoline cars. And you remember, Prius is a hybrid. It doesn't, unless you have a specifically plug-in Prius, it's making its electricity out of gasoline.
And
Sir.
thankfully, and Dave can tell you more about this, MG&E has a pair of programs. One of them is called Green Power Tomorrow, where you can pay a little bit extra per kilowatt hour, and they actually source that electricity from wind. And so you can feel better about that extra electricity that you're using. They also have a shared solar program that you can get into.
Yes, and they're just opening a new one. Sir?
Well, comment too, if you're charging at night, the power plants are producing electricity that's not getting
Let's
used.
talk about that. That's called, Dave, what's that called?
Optional time of use rates.
Time of use rates. Here's the deal, and my numbers are wrong because I haven't studied this lately. Right now, if you're in MG&E's territory, you're paying, if you're on the normal rate structure, you pay 14 cents per kilowatt hour, including everything thrown in, except for the monthly rate you pay for the meter, which is 19 bucks. If you go on time of use metering, your electricity during prime time, which is 10 in the morning till 9 at night, Monday through Friday, your cost of electricity is about 28 cents per kilowatt hour. But outside of that time, all the rest of the time, and federal holidays, it costs 7 cents per kilowatt hour. And that's done automatically for you. You don't have to switch your meter or anything like that. It just happens. Guess when people charge their cars? Absolutely not. And you know what? There are places in America, like in Texas, where electricity is deregulated. That's not really true. There are companies that will give you free electricity overnight if you take a higher rate during the day. Guess where everybody charges their car in Texas? Anybody else?
Two questions. One, is the supercharging tough on a battery?
I have read, I can't say I've read studies. I've read referrals to studies that have studied Tesla batteries that have gone 150,000 miles that have only depleted by somewhere between 3 and 5%. I mean, they seem to have a handle on this. And the difference between, is that me feeding back? The difference between the Leaf and the Tesla is that The Tesla and almost every other car has active heating and cooling for the pack to try to baby them as much as possible. The Leaf, on the other hand, is totally passively cooled and heated. Leafs, when they first came out, were losing 40% of their battery in a year in Arizona and Texas and California because they would just cook in parking lots. I won't say they've solved it, but they've got a pretty good handle on it.
Okay. Second question is, can you use any of that kilowatt power for regular applications? Are there inverters that, can you use that battery pack for other uses?
Well, the best version of what you're talking about is vehicle to grid, V2G, where your car would be plugged into the wall, and during times of maximum usage, you would actually feed the grid and get paid for it. That has not been deployed anywhere in the United States that I know of yet. Nissan actually has a version of that in Japan that you can plug the Leaf in and do exactly that. I don't think Dave, it's not coming here anytime soon, is it? It's pretty technological. It's not there yet.
In other ways.
One use that you will see, Tesla's talked about their pickup truck that they're going to make.
Right.
And there's going to be 110 and 240 outlets
That's
in
what
that
I'm
truck.
asking, yeah.
So you can be on a job site with no electricity and plug in all your tools and actually draw off the battery.
Here's something you need to know about Teslas. Shade tree mechanics need not apply. You're going to look inside the frunks of these things. You can't see anything to touch, much less get your hands on it and hook cables to it. On the other hand, the Leaf, at least my first Leaf, has a bay, and it's got what looks like a motor in there. I have an inverter, and I know how to hook it to the car so that I could actually use the electricity out of the pack to power my refrigerator for 5 days if we had a power failure. But Tesla is shy about that, and maybe they're talking about it, but they have not encouraged it in any way.
And I can say
Sure.
from working on EVs and hybrids and Teslas that they definitely don't encourage it. Anything is possible with money and effort. But
By the way,
there isn't anybody who's really making it an easy thing to do.
by the way, that's Eric Powers. If you have a Prius where the battery is starting to get wacky, call him.
What does it do?
What does what do?
What does it do with the batteries?
He fixes the cars in all sorts of ways.
All sorts of crazy things. We can talk to them.
Two questions. One on temperature. When you're driving around, does the battery self-warm?
Yes, it does. That's why our first charge at Rolling Meadows was so fast, because after 150 miles at 70 miles an hour, the battery has gotten up to operating temperature. And it hasn't had time to cool off, which is the other thing.
And then second, is there a huge difference in power draw going up and down hills?
Yes, headwinds too. The first time we took the car, we just got the car and we drove to Fond du Lac to visit my mother-in-law, and we came back into like a 30-mile-an-hour headwinds. I was getting 450 watts per mile. I was like, there's something wrong here. But no, there was a really hefty wind pushing us back. And the other story I love is that when we rented the Model S and drove to Boston and back, we charged the car to 100% in Springfield, Massachusetts, which is just on the east side of the Berkshire Mountains. And we were once again going to Utica to visit my niece. We start climbing the Berkshires, and we're not halfway up the thing, and a yellow light starts flashing on the screen saying, stay under 65 miles an hour, you're not going to make it. But the computer did not know that on the way down we were going to be regenerating all the way, which refilled the battery, not entirely, but to a certain extent. We made it with tons of space. So yeah, there are variables indeed, but like I said, I'm not the kind of guy who charges the thing for 14 minutes because the computer told me to. Give me a good solid 45 so I know where I'm going.
In a pinch, if you're at a strong headwind, you can draft a big rig.
There is a certain downside to that we don't need to talk about. Sir?
Eventually, I'm assuming the battery pack has to be replaced.
Yeah, well, theoretically, yes, but I've never heard of it. Eric?
The test loop cars, there's a fleet of cars owned by a company that runs essentially a taxi service between Los Angeles and Las Vegas. And these cars continuously drive back and forth between these cities, sometimes multiple times a day. And they live their entire life on superchargers. They hardly ever sit on a slower charger. Those cars have actually had pack replacements. And that's about it.
But they were 200,000.
Yeah, they were well over 200,000 miles.
What's the cost, though, to replace the entire battery pack?
Nobody knows because every single one of them is still covered under
warranty,
which is 8 years and
100,000 miles.
So I can talk to give you an example, in something like the Prius, a brand new pack, which is a 1 mile battery, electric battery
If you're
is
lucky.
about $2,600. So a Nissan Leaf, the 2012 with a 70-mile range. Originally, they were going to allow independents and others to purchase those, and you could buy them and get it done like $5,000. They said originally, which is actually again Prius battery 2 miles is $2,500, and you have a 70-mile battery for $5,000. It's great, but realistically, it's going to probably be beyond that, $8,000 to $10,000.
There was just a call with Tesla, and Elon said that the Model 3 pack, which is made out of 4 modules,
Right. It's like
those
modules.
are going to be individually replaceable, and he said between $5,000 and $7,000.
And that's what I've seen for other vehicles like the Fisker car and other electrics.
Right.
But the reality is,
It's very rare.
Your car for 250,000 miles. I mean, if you keep your car for 250,000 miles, you might have to deal with that.
So here's an example. When I sold solar powered one, my first Leaf, I had lost two bars on the capacity gauge, and by a computer that I had access to, it showed me I was 18% down in 50,000 miles. Now, I mean, that's not bad, but if I kept driving, it would have eventually gotten to a point where I have a 2012 car, it's okay with a squeaky front end. Is it worth what they're going to charge me to replace the pack or just get another car? Now, I happen to fall into the hole here where Nissan was literally giving these things away, and the economics were just straight, there's no question. It comes down to whether you want to have a 2012 car with a brand new battery, when the things that have gotten better, like the heating and the nav and all the other things, when you buy a newer car, there's a lot of progress that has gone in there. So, I mean, it would be a real hard question, especially, I read recently that Nissan is quoting pack replacements for 2016s at $14,000. Yeah. That's what I paid for the entire car. That's just not happening.
And the reality is that's for a 100-mile car.
100-mile car, exactly.
Now there's ones at the minus 200.
Right. I mean, the progress in this, I mean, geez, in the 7.5 years I've been doing this, the progress is just astounding. And to be fair, I didn't mention this. I should have probably said this. Anybody want to guess what I paid for the Model X? How?
$50,000.
Try again. $106,000. It's the last car I'm ever going to own. And the reason that I bought it is because it has 2 things I wanted, one of which I can't get on any other electric car. It has a huge battery pack, and it has a trailer hitch. It's the only electric car that has a factory-installed trailer hitch. I built a camper that I tow behind my Tesla. I get to drive from supercharger to supercharger and supercharger, and eventually, when I have the time, see the world for no cost in electricity, no cost in fuel. Anybody else who wants a ride? Yes, sir. Go.
So is the Tesla front-wheel drive, or do all the wheels
Yes.
drive?
The Tesla is either, depends which one. All the Model X's are all-wheel drive. There are 2 motors in there. The S and the 3, you can usually choose between rear-wheel drive and all-wheel drive. My mother-in-law has a Model 3, which is rear-wheel drive with a 300-mile pack. And I say this all the time. She's 78 years old. She loves this car like no human should love a piece of machinery. She puts snow tires on it. She drives it like a snowmobile. I mean, it's a blast. And even the rear-wheel drive cars are super safe in the snow, and they're very capable.
The S is no longer available new in rear-wheel drive, but there are some used ones.
Oh, yeah?
You can find in rear-wheel drive.
And by the way, remember we announced that they put in new motors in the S and the X to make it more efficient? If anybody's interested, there's going to be a whole bunch of slightly older used ones available. So go to Tesla.com and look on their certified pre-owned page. It's going to be really super populated real soon. Sir?
The Model S is no longer available with the 75.
It is going to be with the new motors.
And yeah, they brought it back.
Yep. Go.
Yes, I have a Volt, 2013 Chevy Volt. I bought it used. I love the car. It's magnificent. But one problem is you drive along at 35 degrees. It has an engine which charges the battery. Doesn't do anything else. This would kick on. 3 times I went to the dealer where I bought it and I said, will you please do something about this issue?
That's the way it's supposed to work.
So
35 degrees.
I can address this.
All right. My son read the manual and adjusted it to 15 degrees. Now it operates just fine. But the dealer could not deal with this problem.
Well, that's a whole other.
For going back and asking the same question.
Is this thing still streaming, Tom?
Yes, it is.
Okay, I'll be nice. Dealers don't want to sell these cars. They don't, because dealers don't make money on cars. They make money on service. How many times did I service my 2012? Once. It was when it was under warranty. How many times did I service my 2016? Never. How many times have I serviced the Tesla? Well, guess what? They came to me to fix the things that weren't quite right when I got it. And I have something in my car that everybody gets, which is called screen yellowing, which is going to have to be replaced real soon. They're going to come to my house to fix that for me for free.
This was a used car, so.
Oh, that's even worse.
It showed the incompetence of Chevrolet.
Well, it's not just
They
Chevy.
can't inform their technicians.
It's not just Chevy, and I feel bad for Bolt. I feel bad for Bolt owners because the Bolt's a hot little car. But if Chevy doesn't want to get behind it, that's not going to be good. And that's one of the reasons why two reasons I never bought a Volt was because first of all, after what happened with the EV1, I didn't trust GM, and secondly, when I sat in the thing, my head was like this on the roof. It's like, you had to build a little sports car here? I mean, how about a little headroom? That would be nice. Man.
What if you don't have a garage to warm up the battery?
Well, actually, I'm ashamed to say this, but because I have my camper out of Dave Wood's storage locker, I park my Tesla in the driveway now. Because one thing, it's a very large car, and the camper and the Tesla don't fit in the garage together very well. The battery just gets colder, and in the Tesla, when you look at one of the problems with the Tesla compared to the Leaf is that the gauges in there are not very granular. For example, there's a temperature gauge that shows you the temperature of the battery in the Leaf. There's nothing like that in the Tesla. But there is a gauge that shows you whether you get regenerative braking. And it'll have little yellow dashes there that'll tell you can't get regen because your battery is cold. It's not bad for it unless you get it cold soaked, like below zero. So be nice to it to the extent that you can, but it's not fatal one way or the other.
If you're going to leave it outside in winter, it's best if you can
Leave it plugged in. Even to 120.
That actually addresses another point. A lot of electric cars, one of the things we do if we're out to eat in the middle of winter or polar vortex is about the time the check arrives, I'll use that app that Bruce showed you at the beginning and start preheating the car. It can be in your garage and do this because it's not emitting any fumes. And so by the time you get to the car, it's all warmed up and ready to go.
And speaking of emitting fumes, I want to say something really here. And I hope the stream is still on. Did everybody see that video of the Tesla catching fire in Singapore the other day?
Yeah.
How many Teslas have caught fire?
Total?
A total of about 50. I mean, 50 or far less. How many gasoline cars catch fire every year? There's a number. 180,000. Close to 500 every day. Now, I'm granted, there's a lot more gas cars, but still, don't think this is crazy on this car when it's not crazy over there. I actually had a Honda Odyssey burn to the ground a quarter mile from my house once, and it was like, yeah, the fire department showed up and said, I don't know. So, anyway, Dave.
We should probably get butts in seats.
We should.
But one comment, and that is on the range. The question I asked you about range, I wanted you to comment on during the polar vortex, the efficiency of internal combustion engine
also
vehicles dropped enormously. They dropped like a rock. So don't beat up electric vehicles too badly.
That is something that people don't recognize because gas is ubiquitous.
Exactly.
I mean, they just throw it in there.
And then there's an upside to range also. Take the Chevy Bolt. It has an EPA estimated range of 238. In nice 72-degree weather, I'm getting reports from Chevy Bolt owners that they're getting 300-mile ranges.
In fact, that Tesla that he just showed the news article about that got announced yesterday, Motor Trend actually drove it from LA or San Francisco to LA and got 360 some because that's
with 18% left in the battery.
There's 18% left, which if you do the math, would have been 400 miles that they could have gone.
But now they were in California. They were told not to drive over 70, which in California is a sin. Anybody else? So, okay, last question.
Okay. Do you know what the design temperature range is for the car?
California.
Yeah.
It works in all temperatures, but the fact of the matter is,
works, but I'm saying
chemistry is chemistry. The colder you get it, the less it works.
Right. So they don't have anything specified where they say
not that I've seen.
Maximum operational.
If I had the link, I could show you pictures of them doing stuff in Norway. Where, by the way, the Model 3 was the largest selling car in Norway last month. Driving through snow, skidding all over the place, having a blast, and you know damn well it's well below 0 Fahrenheit. I mean, it's always below 0 in Norway. So yeah, I mean, it's just a question of knowing where you're going, knowing how much charge you need to get there and back, and if you have to find someplace to charge, know where it is. And the car holds your hand every inch of the way.